Good morning, hello, and welcome to today's session. Over the past 20 years, since the first UK LGBT+History Month in 2005, this month has been an opportunity to highlight the incredible things that LGBT people in all our diversity have achieved throughout history in all areas of life. And each year, we have a theme. And the theme for this year is activism and social change. So throughout LGBT history, LGBT plus people have been activists and helped to shape and create change, advancing society for everyone using many different approaches to activism. So I'm Caroline Gillwood, and I'm the Head of Equality, Diversity and Inclusion here at Royal Voluntary Service. And I am absolutely delighted this morning to be welcoming Stephen Hart to the virtual Village Hall. So just by way of intro, Stephen is an actor, a writer and a YouTuber who fell into activism by accident after writing and starring in his one-man show, Shadow Dreamer, which ran in New York for 9 months, closing off Broadway in 2010. And since then, Stephen started his own YouTube channel, Heart Talks, which follows him as a positive voices speaker for the Terrence Higgins Trust, the London ambassador for Stamp Out Spiking, and a presenter on the radio show, The HIV Hour on Radio Reverb, singing with the Joyful Noise Choir and the West End Musical Choir, and also looking after his 2 lovely cats. So one of the things that's really important to remember as well is after all those years of that one-man show, Stephen's actually brought it to the UK, and he's currently doing a UK tour of Shadowed Dreamer. And we'll pop a link in the chat so that you can have a look at that and see where Stephen is and whether or not there's an opportunity for you to go and see his one-man show for yourself. So welcome, Stephen.
Thanks very much, Caroline. Lovely to be here.
Do you want to maybe just say a little bit about Shadow Dreamer, because we've just spoken about it, and just tell us a little bit about the show and about why you you did it, why you wrote it?
Yeah, sure. So Shadow Dreamer was a kind of had to happen type thing. I'd grown up in a family that was full of secrets, and you know, I found I was carrying the secrets from my family, you know, and I just got to the point in life where I realized I couldn't not say something anymore. So it kind of came as a real outpouring for me to be able to tell my story, to share my story, to let go of all those things that I'd been brought up with. Don't tell anyone. And yeah, I took it to New York. It was far enough away that if it was a disaster, you know, that it would, you know, people here wouldn't know about it. But it didn't. That didn't happen. It took on a life of its own, and it was amazing to realize how important and how necessary our stories are. And yeah, I'm now doing it again 14 years later here in the UK. So it's been an amazing experience, but it's also been something that has really opened the doors for conversation, which, you know, as we all know, is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Stephen. And I think it's a great introduction, actually, to social action, social change and activism, because it comes in many different forms, doesn't it? And it's interesting that you know, your story and the need for it to be heard is still needed, you know, after such a huge amount of time. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your own personal experience with activism. And obviously, as a gay man, you know, Section 28 would have been something that would have had a huge impact, you know, which obviously was the law that prohibited the promotion, so-called promotion of same-sex relationships in schools, and obviously, you know, books in libraries and generally in social care, actually. And, you know, I wondered if you could just tell us a little bit about your personal journey around that time of Section 28 and since then.
Yeah, so Section 28, as I'd said earlier about my show, it was about all the secrets that we hold on to, and secrets kind of so often encourage shame, you know, and that's what Section 28 did for myself and other LGBTQ people at school. You know, we were ashamed because we were told it couldn't be spoken about. It was not in any of our lessons. It was not, you know, in our sexual education, the minimal sexual education that we did have. So looking back on it, I realized how damaging it was. And it's funny, even now, I still find myself talking about Section 28 all these years later, even though, it's been repealed and everything, those years of being at school and not being able to be proud and open about who I was, definitely, encouraged me to be scared of being gay and scared of sharing my the fact that I was gay with anybody. So I definitely feel as if it held me back for many years, and still occasionally, to this day, I'll still find the Section 28 thing sitting on my shoulder, and I have to go, I have to brush it off and go, that's not where we are now. And it's okay to be proud of who I am.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think the impact was far and wide, wasn't it? Because, even school teachers who were themselves LGBTQ, they had to keep it a secret in fear of losing their jobs. And,
Yep.
Families, same-sex families, for example, the shame and the guilt. And actually, some people would say that it was state-sanctioned discrimination.
Yeah.
It was like our government was saying that it was okay to erase and discriminate against a particular group of people. And it's pretty powerful, isn't it, when you think about it in that context?
Yeah, and we look at things that are going on currently, and the transgender community. I feel like Section 28 is happening to them again.
Yeah.
It's so it's something that we have to keep banging that drum to make sure that it's okay to be who we are.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, we've talked a little bit about how Section 28 affected you personally, and obviously that drive in terms of your professionalism. But what motivated you to become a campaigner? The work that you're doing with Terrence Higgins Trust, for example, and being the ambassador for London, around the spiking campaign. What is it that motivates you to do that work?
I always say to people, Caroline, that I fell into activism completely by accident. I never imagined being an activist. It was not something that was on my radar. I didn't think that I could do that. But again, it goes back to the power of our stories and how that one story can be the one thing that makes a difference for somebody. And so I kind of did fall into it by accident, and then gradually realized that that speaking out has a power in itself, and once I started speaking out, I realized that my story mattered, that it had a place, that I know that, hearing other people talk, that their experiences really, enrich my life, hearing people talk about it. So yeah, it was all a bit of an accident. And now, all these years later, as you say, I'm speaking for so many different organizations and charities and things that it's become a very automatic but rewarding thing, that I do. But there was never any set idea that I was like, I'm gonna make change. I'm gonna share my story and make change. It didn't happen in that way. But I know now that by doing it, that I can see change happening, and that is amazingly important for me and for other people that I'm sharing my story with. I feel.
Yeah, I absolutely. That really resonates with me, and I'm sure it will with our listeners as well and our viewers, because I think sometimes activism can have a box, can't it, in terms of, you need to be out on the streets, you need to be shouting, you need to be sort of, waving those banners, and activism comes in lots of different ways, doesn't it? And you've highlighted that beautifully, Stephen, by talking about, your honesty and, making your story visible, and that in itself is activism, isn't it? Because it's, sort of challenging the secrets, eradicating those secret places and ensuring that people understand, the impact that secrets and lies and trauma can have on people. And so I wondered what you thought about activism in its biggest sense of the word, really.
Yeah, I think activism is really important. And as you say, Caroline, it can come in at so many different shapes and forms. I saw a lot of activism within creativity. That was a big thing for me. And I didn't realize it was activism at the time. But looking back on it now, I realized that it was. And yeah, it can come in so many different shapes, forms, and ways that but it's so important. It's so important to because so often activism comes with pride, and pride again was something that I didn't have during Section 28. Shame, it was more shame, so yeah, and I think it's so important for people to be able to look up to people who are talking and speaking out, not in a hero worship type way, but just in a, if they can do it, I can do it, to give people hope, so I know that the activism that I saw when I was younger gave me hope, and I think that activism is something that we will always need, because there's always going to be somebody that's going to be told that they're not worthy or they don't have a place, or so activism is something. And I think it's so important to say, as you say, you don't have to be out on the street with a banner and activism can come in small different ways, and but I always think that every piece of activism is making a difference to somebody, so don't ever think that your activism isn't valid or isn't needed, because it really is.
Yeah, absolutely. And, even, voting, our right to vote and actually exercising that right, that can be, sort of seen as activism, can't it? Because you're making it known, what your views are and how you want our country to be run, for example, and the things that are important and you believe in, and, volunteering, going and volunteering for a charity that's really important to you, that's a form of activism, signing that petition on something that you're really, annoyed about, or you don't think's right or is unjust in some way, those kind of things that, we can all partake in activism and having our voice heard and making our position on something, how we feel about something, that's really important. And actually, in terms of the repeal of Section 28, which you mentioned earlier in our conversation, that wouldn't have happened if that had just been LGBTQ people who had campaigned against it. We needed allies. We needed, sort of people that weren't part of our community, but believed that what was happening was wrong, to stand up and to speak for us and to say that. So it's not just for our own community to do that, but it's people who believe that whatever's happening to that individual or that community is unjust, and how they can actually articulate that, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to move on to a slightly more personal note for you, Stephen, and talk a little bit about living with HIV, actually, and you talking about that very openly, which again, is definitely another form of activism, and the fact that you speak out, as part of Terrence Higgins Trust and Positive Voices is really powerful. And I wanted to just talk to you a little bit about you and your life and your experience. So, just wondering a little bit about your diagnosis of HIV and how did it actually change your perspective on life?
Again, Caroline, it was something that once I was diagnosed, I was told not to tell anyone, to keep it a secret. So again, I spent the next 2 years actually waiting to die, because in school we had not been taught about HIV, and it was at the height of the AIDS epidemic.
Yeah.
We had been taught nothing. So all I knew was from the press.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will remember what the press was like over those years. It was horrendous.
Yeah.
The stories, the headlines on the papers and things like that. So I thought that, even though I was diagnosed in 2006, I thought it was still a death sentence.
Yeah.
So it took a couple of years of educating myself on the education that I hadn't had at school about this, to realize that I had a possibility of a life, of a future. Now looking back on it 18 years later, I can see that, I definitely have that, but at the time I didn't know. So it was devastating, Caroline. It was absolutely devastating, because I thought, well, this is it, I'm going to die. And that was due to not being educated on it.
Yeah.
And
And
not knowing enough myself, not even in all the years that had gone on, I still hadn't been brave enough to educate myself, because I just thought, we don't talk about things like that.
Yeah. Thank you. That's such an honest account of what went on for you. And you're thriving, you're not just living, but you're actually thriving, your one-man show and the activism that you do, and, your YouTube channel, for example, so what, in terms of your perspective on life, after those first couple of years, which I can't imagine just how difficult they must have been for you. But once you started to get the knowledge, and once you started to understand that, there were opportunities for you to live and thrive, what would you say to other folk out there around, an HIV diagnosis?
I think what happened for me, Caroline, was I as the years went on, I became very lucky in being able to hear stories from other people living with HIV, living well with HIV. And I always say that I my activism is because of them, because of being able to stand on their shoulders and see what they did. And, so it's kind of come full circle, really. And my understanding and my being aware more of things has been the thing that has helped me realize that I do have a future, and that I can live well, and that I can continue to do these things. So the having them and their stories is really what made me feel strong enough and able to tell my story.
Yeah. Amazing. I wondered whether or not, because obviously, we've touched a little bit on discrimination and stigma, in terms of that shame and guilt, and, that stigma that comes along with either, being LGBTQ or HIV positive, for example. So did you yourself face any stigma or discrimination due to your HIV status? And if you did, how did you deal with that?
Yeah, definitely. When I was diagnosed in 2006, I was told by my agent at the time that nobody with HIV would ever have a lead role in the West End or on Broadway.
Wow.
And that was my dream. That was, so I felt at the time I had to give up on my dreams, because I was told that there was no place for me, so that was definitely discrimination in itself. It was but also I think that there was self-stigma, which is something that is massive and that you can hold on to for years. So there was that self-stigma, and then there was also the stigma that was coming from other people, and it was very it was in my dating years and things like that, and it was just I felt at the time it was best to tell somebody that you were that I was HIV positive. And so many times, you know, it was just like, oh, sorry, I'm not interested. I'm not, you know, every you could feel things changing straight away, you know, but also in work, you know, because it was in the time when you were advised to tell your employer that you were HIV positive. So so often, you know, going into, because I came out of acting because I just didn't feel as if there was a place there for me, and went into education. And again, you know, when I told my employer, I was told, don't tell anyone, you know,
Yeah.
so so yeah, I felt stigma and discrimination all around me, and it still happens nowadays, but I'm a lot better. I'm a lot you know, I'm set up for it a lot better now, you know. And if somebody's going to discriminate or has stigma against me, then I'll try to talk to them about it, and I'll try and inform them and educate them, you know, on what HIV is, because it's not what it was in the 80s. It's definitely not. You know, there was so much death, you know, but now it's not. It's life, you know. It's about making the most of this life that we have, not because we think it's going to be over, but because why not, you know. So so yeah, stigma has definitely, it's unfortunately something that hangs over every person living with HIV, because it's still there, it's still very real. And that's why, you know, myself as a Positive Voices speaker for Terrence Higgins Trust do what I do, because I want to go in and break down some of those walls of stigma, you know, and especially with young people, you know, because what we find is so often that discrimination is passed down from the parents, because it's what they knew, it's what they grew up with. Again, they probably didn't grow up with any you know, due to Section 28, you know, their understanding was a lot less. So it's that's why I continue to tell my story in the hope that it will make a difference.
Yeah. And Stephen, what steps do you think that are crucial in raising awareness around HIV and supporting those people who are HIV positive?
I think it's having a face to you know, having a face now to what HIV looks like, you know. I always say to people, this is what HIV looks like nowadays, you know, not what we grew up with, you know, the skeletal, frail men, you know, that were all dying, you know. So it's about allowing somebody to ask questions as well, you know, to ask those questions that you might think, oh, is it okay to ask this? And go, yeah, it is okay to ask this, that, you know, because I would rather you knew from me, from somebody living with it, you know. And yeah, just getting educated, you know, Caroline, because it's so, you know, there's so much out there now that wasn't, you know, there was things around when I was first diagnosed, but I just didn't feel ready and able to dip into those things. So it's being able to be seen and be heard and be and to be seen to be living well and happy and healthy lives with HIV now. Although saying that, also being educated enough to know that you don't have, you know, HIV is not something that has to be a risk anymore, because there's so many you know, there's been so many advancements in treatment, in everything, you know, in everything to do with HIV. It's changed massively. So yeah, it's just been able to, for people to be able to see, you know, people like me who are living well.
Yeah, thank you. And you know, you talked a bit about time and treatments moving on, and I think, you know, changes over time generally around you know, LGBTQ plus history has moved on. You know, we've had some fantastic achievements, haven't we, in terms of changes in legislation. But, you know, how do you think that attitudes have changed towards the LGBTQ plus community and people living with HIV, you know, since that time, Section 28? Because, you know, when you and I had our intro call, we talked a little bit about, you know, some of the, you know, trying to grab hold of the positives of that time, you know. So, you know, we know that it was a really, you know, a crucial time for people within our own community, so lesbians and gay men or bi people, for example, coming together in solidarity and really supporting each other during that time, you know. And I wondered whether or not, you know, you had any reflections on how attitudes have changed towards our community and people living with HIV since then.
Yeah, I think it's okay for people like me to be seen and to be heard now, Caroline, and that's a change, you know, because you know, in the past, you know, was speaking to somebody last week, and they said in the past it would have been that, you know, if you were speaking to somebody that was gay, people might think that you were gay as well. So there was you know, so it's about being able to accept that information and that support and that, you know, that we are trying to put out there. And I think, you know, the LGBT community have gone through so much over the years, and they've had so many fights, and you know, you know, marriage, HIV, you know, all, you know, rights in as far as you know, part, you know, being married and the rights that that gives you or doesn't give you, you know, that there's always been a fight, and I suppose, you know, until we have equal rights, that will continue, you know. But it's just different now, because I think that the LGBT community, you know, have always been great at coming together when needed, you know. But I think that I think our straight allies, you know, I think there's more place for them now to be to be sitting around the table with us, you know, and be part of it, because I think before, you know, there was a fear of, will they think that I'm HIV positive as well? Will they think, you know, and that, I think that discouraged people from you know, tapping in, you know, whereas we were talking, weren't we, Caroline, you know, about the amazing work that the lesbian community did for men living with HIV back in the 80s, you know, and there was so many organizations and things that were set up to support gay men living and dying with HIV, because you know, with from AIDS, because that's what was happening back in that time, you know. So so yeah, there was definitely, I think the past, we can look on and say there was definitely more of a community, you know, than there tends to be nowadays, because life's changed so much, and you know, people don't connect as well. But it's important that if you want to be an ally, or if you want to be an advocate, that there is space for you, and that there is, you know, that you can come to people like you and I and say, what can I do? I'd like to do something. So coming together as an ally, but also the LGBT community, knowing that there is a place for you to be part of whatever might be going on is important.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And, you know, again, looking at today and the future, you know, what do you see as the biggest challenges facing the LGBT community today?
I think one of the biggest challenges is just to be a community again, you know, to come together and to make change with you know, a group of voices is so important and so special, you know, that, you know, it's really necessary that, you know, with, you know, technology, and, you know, people aren't connecting as much as, you know, anymore. So it's important to be able to know that there is a space for you, and that there is community is important, you know, and it's necessary, you know. So yeah, I think.
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right, Stephen. And, you know, I think in terms of the current challenges, for me, I think, you know, obviously we've got, you know, sort of the discrimination against the trans community, and some of the divides that we have within our own community, because sometimes I think people can see us as a bit of a homogenized group, you know, the LGBT community, but each of those letters have their own communities, don't they, within those communities. And sometimes, you know, you talked about lesbians and gay men coming together, you know, during Section 28 and the HIV and AIDS time, you know, and how powerful that was, you know, that it was that opportunity for us to come to, you know, to be, you know, sort of come together in solidarity. But, you know, it's there can be divides within our own community as well, can't there? And I think that, you know, the trans community in particular right now are coming under a lot of discrimination. And what it does for me is it demonstrates that those hard-won fights and those you know, rights that we've gained over the years, you know, you talked about some already, you know, and there's also things like adoption rights and, you know, things like, you know, being accepted within the military, for example, you know, there's so many, isn't there, you know, and but they can be taken away.
Yeah.
You know, we can see pockets across the world, can't we? If you look internationally, you know, where, you know, we won't talk about any particular place, but, you know, if you've got your eye on the news, you'll see that rights are being kind of eroded, you know, across the world. And, you know, interestingly, one of our community actually here on the virtual village hall has asked the question for you, Stephen, about, do you actually think that there's pressure on all LGBTQ plus people, for example, to be activists? You know, do you think there's a bit of a pressure there?
Yeah, I think it's okay to not be an activist. You know, as much as it's wonderful if you can be an activist, it's not something that you have to do if you fall into LGBTQ, you know, umbrella. Don't feel the pressure, because then it's not coming from somewhere that, you know, it's not coming from because you want to do it or you feel the need to do it. But I think it's important to open our eyes, because sometimes even in our own communities, it's easy to be able to close the door and say, oh, that doesn't bother, that doesn't affect me, you know. So it's okay to not be an activist, but at the same time, you know, as we've said, activism comes in different shapes and forms, and even to be signing a petition, as you mentioned, you know, that's a form of activism. You know, going away from this chat and saying, you know, informing somebody else what HIV looks like now, you know, is also activism.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be those, you know, those ways we imagine activism to be. So so yeah, so it's you're probably, a lot of people are probably being activists and not even realizing it. So but yeah, it's important to support our community, but I also feel that we shouldn't become so involved, so you know, think that, oh, we can only do it for our community, because there's a big wide world out there that are always going to need people to speak up, you know. So so, you know, whether that the matter of, you know, the issue affects you or not, then if you've got something important to bring to the table, then bring it, you know, because it will be necessary and it will be useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if you would agree with me, but, you know, even coming out, you know, and actually, you know, telling somebody that you've never met before, that your partner, you know, is same sex, for example, you know, that's a form of activism, isn't it? Because it's ensuring, you know, that you know, the recognition and the visibility of, you know, LGBTQ plus identities stays live. And, you know, so I think that you're absolutely right. And, you know, activism comes in lots of shapes and forms. And actually, it's also about making sure that you're safe as well, isn't it? It's like not doing something just because you feel you have to, and making sure that you're always safe, whatever it is that you're doing from an activist perspective as well.
Yeah, I think safety is important, you know, and it's not to scare people, but, you know, be aware of the you know, the room that you're walking into, be aware of what the discussion is. And you know, you don't, if you're an activist, you don't have to be an activist 24/7. It's okay to go, this isn't a space for, you know, this isn't the right space, or this, you know. So yeah, so it's just kind of, you know, weighing up where, when, and how.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in terms of, we talked a little bit about allies and allyship, didn't we? And, you know, just for the people on Virtual Village Hall, when we talk about allies, we talk about people that don't belong to that particular community. So you're not LGBTQ plus, for example, but you understand that, you know, and you stand with that community. It doesn't, you know, and that you understand that, you know, some of the discrimination isn't right, and you want to stand up and you want to ensure that's prevented if you possibly can. So Stephen, from your perspective, what advice would you give to allies? You know, whether or not that might be somebody's mum, somebody's auntie, you know, somebody's uncle, brother, friend, work colleague, you know, whatever. You know, what would be the best ways to show solidarity, do you think, with the LGBT community?
I think it's important to ask questions, because, you know, questions start a conversation, and conversation will, you know, will help to educate and inform. I think that I think, as I said earlier, it's okay to be an ally, but not, you don't have to have your ally hat on 24/7 as well. You know, it's okay to take a break from it, but it's, you know, supporting one another is just, I think it's the basis of it, you know, whether it's an ally who is not aware of something, or is wants more information on something, being there and being available to talk and discuss these matters, just will, you know, because if you're coming from a different community and you don't know, you know, I'm not a trans man, so I don't know, I can't understand in the same way as a trans person could, does. So discussion again is so important. And yeah, I think that's just the backbone of it, you know. But supporting, you know, support is another important thing, just to support yourself and to support them, and to, you know, and again, it goes back to community and coming together and becoming a stronger ally, because you have the information, you have the support, and you know that if you need to ask questions, then it's okay to, you know, it's okay to be unsure and to go, could you explain this to me, or could you, you know, tell me what the T stands for in LGBT, you know, if you don't know these things, it's okay. You know, I think questions are really, really important, as long as they come from a place of you know, wanting to know more and wanting to understand better.
Yeah, I think when I think about, you know, when would I feel confident that somebody was being an ally to me? And that's not necessarily standing up for me when I'm in the room, but standing up for me when I'm not in the room.
Exactly.
You
Yeah.
know, so you and I will both know that, you know, conversations about, you know, sort of LGBTQ plus identities when LGBTQ plus people aren't in the room can sometimes be quite different, can't they? And it might be that bit of banter, or that, you know, sort of joke, if you like, that people make. And for me, an ally would be somebody that would challenge that, even if I'm not in the room.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
that for me is really true allyship, actually. So it's not just because I'm there and they can say, oh yeah, I was an ally, but actually, you know, having my back, if you like, or having my community's back when I'm not in the room. So if somebody makes a joke about, you know, an LGBTQ plus inappropriate joke, but just somebody goes, oh, actually, that's not cool, that makes me feel quite uncomfortable, or, you know, that's not okay to say that, actually, you know, that's really quite hurtful, you know, what you did, that would be hurtful to someone.
And I think that's so much what being an ally and being an advocate is. It's about the support throughout. You know, it's not about support when people can see it and go, oh, they're a wonderful ally. You know, it's about being an ally, you know, as you say, when you're not in the room, and supporting and uplifting, you know, that community, you know, for, you know, wherever you are in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much, Stephen. So I want to go back to your one-man show. So where are you in your cycle of UK tour? Where are you now?
So I'm about to do London again. So I did London back in December. I'm doing London again on the 15th of Feb. And then I'm off to Manchester,
Oh, great.
which is great because obviously Manchester's got a great LGBT community. So it'll be
Yeah,
great to share it with them. So I'm going down
yeah.
there for the 20th and 21st of February. So yeah, so it's currently, then I've got Plymouth after that, then got Newcastle. So it's
Oh,
kind of,
wow.
it's kind of all over. I've done
Yeah.
Glasgow. It was great because obviously I'm from Glasgow originally. So it was great to do it in my hometown because that was a big thing because
Yeah.
again, I grew up as a gay man I was only gay in gay safe spaces.
Yeah.
I wasn't able to be gay, everywhere. So to be able to go back to my hometown and
Mm,
one, tell my story as a gay man, but two, tell it as a gay man living with HIV
yeah.
was something I never ever imagined ever, thought I would do. So it's been amazing to be able to share and start conversation,
Yeah.
after the show, we would people would meet up and it would be like there was just this conversation going around, Caroline, that was so important because I was like, gosh, you've never asked this question before, you've
Yeah.
never, so people were like, oh, I didn't know that, and I didn't know, we've got undetectable equals untransmittable now with HIV, so it means that
Mm,
it's completely impossible for me to pass the virus on,
mm,
because it's so reduced in my body. And to be giving that information to people and that, and for people to go, I'd never heard of that. And I go,
yeah.
wow, you know it now, so it's, it's been good. And, I just can't wait to see what happens next with it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I don't know whether or not there were any questions. Obviously, there was a question around pressure on activism, but I just wanted to say to you, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you today and, talk to you about activism and social change. And, you've been able to articulate, your journey through that and really, really well. So it's been an absolute pleasure, Stephen, to talk with you today. Now, there will be a link in the comments for Stephen's show if anybody wants to go and find out more about it and share it with people who you think might be interested and whether or not they're in a place where they can go and see the show over the next few weeks. But yeah, apart from that, I've got nothing left to say, but thank you so much, Stephen. And it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Caroline.
All right. Well, listen, you take care. And bye-bye to everybody on Virtual Village Hall.